On this episode of Still Loading, the Directx box. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the release of the original Xbox, and I couldn't do it alone. In fact, I think it's been a long time since my guest here has been on the show. He was last on the show for Sissy Jones back in December of 2020. So it's crazy to think you've been away as a guest for that long. But my friend Andrew from the Experience Point is here. Andrew, how are you doing?
I am hanging in there. I can feel the gray hairs growing as soon as you said 20th anniversary of the original Xbox.
Just your hair, you can feel the age just seeping out of your pores.
Yep, my skin is just slowly falling off.
You got to get some Botox up in there.
I know,
right? Anyway, we are here to talk about the original Xbox. Can you believe it's 20 years old? It's just wild to think about that. We are 20 years past it, and now, just last year, Xbox released their fourth ever console, the Xbox Series X, which
the very easy to understand naming conventions that they've always had.
Xbox 360. Okay, you wanted 360. I could at least argue like, okay, you wanted to compete with the PS3, so it's kind of like you could at least make that argument. And then 360, it's all encompassing everything. So I get it. Xbox One was just an awful name.
The worst.
Awful naming convention. I can think of very few consoles that have succeeded without a good naming convention. Like, look at the Wii U, bombed.
Nope.
The failed Nintendo ones, like, at least were somewhat interesting.
Yeah. I'm surprised, like, when the PS4 came out, the Xbox One wasn't like Xbox 540 because 5's bigger than 4.
Everyone thought it was going to be the 720 or something like that.
I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad it wasn't, but I also am mad that it was Xbox One, because now we have to say the original Xbox. You can't say like, oh, it was on Xbox One.
It's so annoying. And it's even more crazy to think about, like, the Xbox Series X wouldn't be an awful naming convention if they didn't have the Pro version of the Xbox One be the Xbox One X.
Right. Xbox One X, and then there's Xbox One S, and then Series X, and then Series S. Like, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Well, it's awful. But, let's go back to a happier time before they fucked up the name real bad for like years and years and years. So we have the original Xbox, which in North America came out on November 15th, 2001 in North America. And it was on February 22nd, 2002 in Japan. And then March 14th everywhere else in Australia and Europe, also in 2002. The lifespan of the console went from 2001 to 2009, which is kind of hard to think about. I didn't know that it was still going. It was discontinued in North America in 2009. In Japan, you want to take a guess? Because the Xbox famously did awful in Japan and continues to do awful in Japan.
Yes.
What year do you want to guess that it was discontinued in Japan, considering that it started in 2002?
2003.
Not quite that bad.
No, it wasn't that. I know it wasn't that
bad. 2006. It lasted 4 years in Japan before they discontinued it.
Yeah.
June
to be
4th.
fair, there wasn't a whole lot of, like, there wasn't really much to cater to Japanese audiences on the Xbox. Like, at least definitely at launch, and even not that much afterwards.
Well, yes and no. They tried. That's actually eventually. Why they partnered with a lot of Japanese game companies at the time to make games for games to come out. That's why you got Jet Set Radio features, because they were really trying to appeal to the Japanese market. It didn't work.
Yeah.
I did hear though that they were this close, like this close to getting Resident Evil 4 on it. Like
Oh wow.
like as an exclusive, but Shinji Mikami, the director of the Resident Evil games, he met with Xbox before it became a GameCube exclusive for, until it got ported everywhere else. But before it became a GameCube exclusive, they met with Xbox, and whoever met with him, basically they didn't relay what Microsoft's approach to game design was, and he basically asked them like, what's your approach on games?" And the Xbox official stance was supposed to be, we consider games art. We can consider them designers are artists, and the games themselves are art. But that's not what was relayed to Shinji Mikami. The people who were like representing Microsoft didn't have an answer, so he was like, well, f that. And he was worried, based the vibe that I understood, he didn't feel like they were going to be appreciated by Xbox, so he decided to go
Huh.
with the tried and true Nintendo.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, I would probably do the same thing in his position. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge risk on a console that at the time was not cared about in your country. So like,
Well, it was even before. I mean, if you think about it, but that's development of the game. So development of the game was probably starting when the Xbox first came out,
yeah, yeah.
right? Because I think what Resident Evil 4 came out in what 04 or something like that. Let
I'm
me
actually
actually double
not.
check. I can look it up right now, but it came out in 2005, so it would have been probably right at the launch of the original Xbox that they were
Yeah,
having these conversations, depending on how many years it took to develop, of course.
yeah.
But
And we also know how, you know, xenophobic Japan is as a company. So it's like, do we go
as a
to
country,
Sony?
not a
As,
and a
or that's
company.
right, as a company, Japan, the corporate entity known as Japan. So they're like, should we go to Sony, Japanese company, Nintendo, a Japanese company, or Bill Gates, some rich dude in America wants to make video
Hmm.
games?
Yeah, it's a shame because it probably would have helped them out like drastically to have that big of a title as like an exclusive on the like
Yeah,
for in the Japan market. Obviously, Xbox here it did okay. It sold about 24 million units, which was literally less than half of what the PS4 sold. Or sorry, PS2,
yeah.
and probably the PS4. In all honesty, PS4 sold a decent amount. But if you think about it, the PS2 sold 150 million, so it
Hmm.
sold it sold a sixth of what the PS2 did.
Jeez.
So, but at the same time, though, think about that. The PS2 sold 150 million units, and at least in the American market, the Xbox was not forgotten. Like it still had a pretty good stake in the American market. So considering that it sold a sixth worldwide compared to the PS2, and it still has that reverence in American nostalgia, it kind of shows
Yeah.
how well Microsoft marketed it, at least in the US. It did awful everywhere else.
Yeah, and
No,
I
actually, well,
mean,
Europe it might have been fine because I see it's discontinued in '07, just 2 years prior to what was in North America. So maybe it
yeah,
did okay.
for a company's first foray into consoles, like over here, like it did great. I mean, it's Microsoft, so like,
They have billions of dollars to throw behind it.
well, yeah, so they could, the marketing was no problem. They put that out friggin' everywhere, and like launching an official Xbox magazine just to like get that out there, which is, we'll get into games and memories later, but like that's how I found a lot of games that I ended up loving, was from that magazine because they had the demo discs and stuff.
I
Um,
actually have one for Splinter Cell. I had a Splinter Cell demo disc because I'm pretty sure
yeah,
wasn't Splinter Cell like a timed exclusive for the Xbox. I
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I just remember Splinter Cell for a while for me was synonymous with Xbox, but I could be way off about that. Let me check in on that really fast. I'm looking it up. But let me actually let's see. The Xbox, yeah, it started on the Xbox. It came out like 6 months or 4 months prior to everywhere else. Splinter Cell was out on November 17th, 2002 for the original Xbox in North
Mhm.
America. In Europe, it got to PlayStation 2 a little bit earlier. We'll stick with the North American release dates though. Uh,
That's
it
bizarre. I don't
it
think I
made it
ever
to
knew.
Windows in February of '03 and to PS2 in April of '03, GameCube in also April '03, but 2 days later. That's interesting. There's a Game Boy Advance version of Splinter Cell. I
Yeah,
wonder
that
what
was back
that's
when
like.
they did Game Boy Advance versions of
Like
everything, and they were
2D
all
versions, like
bad.
the 2D side scrolling versions of a 3D game. I kind of love that though. I love that they decided to make a completely different game, sort
Yeah,
of.
sort of.
Uh,
I actually didn't know that. I think I always just thought that Splinter Cell was always in the first three anyway, the original trilogy. I could have sworn that was only Xbox.
no, I mean it
Maybe
did
it's
get.
just the like black and green color scheme that makes me only think that it's
I think
synonymous with
you
the
know what?
Xbox.
That's probably it. That's honestly probably it. That's why I consider it such an Xbox. But to be fair, it did start on the Xbox. It was I don't know if it
Yeah.
was a timed exclusive, but it had like 4 or 5 months being Xbox exclusive.
Mm.
Even in Europe, it was released in Europe in 2002 for the original Xbox. So it it was pretty much like an Xbox exclusive for a long while. At least the original one. I don't know when the other ones ended up you know, coming out and what their release dates were. But anyway, we will dive into now or but anyway, let's dive into the history of the console now. The so Microsoft prior to coming up with the Xbox, they wanted to get into the video game industry because of the success of the PS2. They
Mm.
even though it came out like a year later, they were worried about the threat of the PS2 because they were worried that the PlayStation 2 was going to take some of their market share in the PC gaming space. And up until that point, really the only stuff that Microsoft owned in terms of games was Microsoft Flight Simulator and Age of Empires, believe it or not. I
Huh.
actually did not know Age of Empires was a Microsoft property for a while. I thought maybe they acquired them later on, but apparently Age of Empires has been a thing that Microsoft has owned for a while at the very
Hmm.
least. Let
I've,
me double check
I've
that real quick.
never I've never been interested in those games. So
What? What are you talking about?
what?
They're great.
Oh, I can't.
You're not an RTS fan
I
though.
cannot stand RTSs. The only one I ever remotely liked was StarCraft, and that was just because I liked the setting and the
Setting's great.
cutscenes were cool.
Um, so Microsoft wanted to get into it because they saw that PlayStation was going to kind of take a chunk out of their market. And admittedly, that's not an outlandish thing because the PS2 was so powerful. In fact, the PS2 you could install Linux on it and turn it into a kind of a
Yeah.
like a semi desktop type of
Mhm.
thing. It was really interesting. So they were really trying to make sure that they could retain that foothold in it. And that's kind of why you see with the Sega Dreamcast and kind of started their relationship with Sega that there's Windows CE on the Sega Dreamcast. They used the
Yeah.
Windows CE operating system to assist with parts of the Dreamcast, which I think is kind of interesting. And it's funny though, they originally tried to sell their operating system to Sony to help with the PS2 and Sony turned them down. And apparently Bill Gates took that personally and
Yeah, I was just thinking of the Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally.
he did apparently like, from I was reading like a quote or I was watching a video about it, and apparently the Sony's president, I don't know if it was the president of their gaming division or the president of the whole company, but basically he said that it seemed like Bill was like annoyed by that, like almost like this was a personal affront to him even though it was just a business decision.
Yeah.
um
So he's like,
and
I'm gonna make my own console with blackjack and
and
hookers.
hookers. I was thinking the same thing, like Bender from Futurama. And so then they decided to get into the gaming sphere. And what's interesting is the first prototype for the original Xbox was actually made out of disassembled Dell laptops.
I believe it. They probably
That's
had all that stuff lying around.
I mean, they just yeah, and they were trying to find like a computer manufacturer to assist them with it, but they realized it would just be so cost prohibitive that they would have to end up doing it all in the house. Or it's
Yeah.
not even that it was cost prohibitive; it was more like logistics was an issue. It was going to be more expensive for them to do it in house, but it was easier for I guess for them to control everything, and sometimes
Mm.
that's just better for business in the long run. I don't know, but yeah, so the name of the Xbox comes from, and you heard it probably in the intro, DirectX, Microsoft's program DirectX, which was basically an application on your computer, like a program on your computer that allowed game designers to speak directly to the hardware of the computer instead of having to go through go through the operating system to an extent. And what it offered was that if you had different, or how did they describe it? Hold on. Basically allowed 3D games to be run on a computer without the developers, having to create a version of for each possible graphics card. So the DirectX kind of streamlined everything for them, so that way it just makes game development easier. You don't have to account for as many variables when you're dealing with different computer systems. And it was created by 3 different Microsoft employees: Craig Eisler, Eric Angstrom, and Alex St. John. And like I said before, they Bill Gates offered DirectX to Sony, so it's that was what he offered. It wasn't necessarily a Windows operating system, it was DirectX, and they declined, and that's when he got kind of angry and butthurt about
it.
Yeah. So they got their first taste of it with Sega, and so they dove head first into the console scene. And the Xbox is called the Xbox because it uses DirectX. And for a while, they were actually there was some conflict within Microsoft because Microsoft had recently bought oh my gosh, what were they called? A streaming service called Web TV, which I didn't even know really existed. It was an online service for your television. I don't know much about it. I'd have to look more into it.
Are they trying to resurrect the Sega channel?
I know, right? They wanted to build the console off of their existing technology, and the guys in Microsoft wanted to build it off of a PC, like take a PC and kind of dumb it down a little bit to create the console. And the other guys wanted to build up like this web streaming device to turn it into a video game console. The Microsoft guys won. That's kind of obvious now because the Xbox is known for really kind of revolutionizing a whole bunch of stuff. Kind of like making consoles a lot more computer like than ever before. In fact, it was the first console to feature an Ethernet port. It wasn't the first one to go online. We know the Dreamcast had a modem that you could connect with, but this this allowed for full high-speed internet with your Ethernet port, which you couldn't do beforehand. It also was the first console to ever have a hard drive built into the system. Everything else was done on memory cards,
which I'm still convinced that original Xbox hard drives cannot be filled. Because in the menu, like when you're scrolling through, like you can go into memory, and everyone's Xbox always said like 500 or 50,000 plus blocks free, and that never went down. So in my head canon is that they are just portals to another universe, and they are never ever going to be filled.
I'm trying to see now. Like I wonder.
It's probably like 16 gigs or something like absurdly small, like today's comparison.
I want to see if it tells you, because I'm looking up how much. Yeah, the Xbox was the first console to feature a built-in hard drive, but it doesn't tell me. I'm sure I can find it. I'm sure I can find it. You're gonna have to hear some more clicking
because it's not a number that human minds can understand yet. Yeah, because I downloaded like all kinds of like custom like Halo game types and maps, and I saved all these screenshots and videos and replays and uploaded every CD that I owned, and it's still like I never got any kind of warnings that I was running out of space. It's a wormhole.
Wow, it actually, so just looking at it right now, I don't know if this is actually correct or not. Based off the other specs, I think it's right, because I just Googled it real quick. This actually makes sense. It actually stored 8 or 10 gigs. That's a lot.
That's a lot for the time.
That's a lot for the time. Holy shit. Like, considering PS2 memory cards were like, what, 8 megabytes?
Yeah.
Or if you had the supersized one that was like 16. That's just wild. So yeah, I mean that 8 to 10 gigabytes at that time might as well just been a black hole, because I can't
Yeah.
imagine like game file sizes were not that large. What I think the reason they did it for, and I use this a little bit. I think you talked about. Did you talk about ripping CDs to it or no?
Yep.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
single CD that I owned, I put on the Xbox, and I watched
Yeah.
that visualizer as I was playing like Linkin Park and Gorillaz and stuff.
Did you ever play Counter Strike on the original Xbox?
The port like of the PC game.
Yeah.
Yes, and I hated it because I was used to that was one of the only PC games that I was like, I gotta play on mouse and keyboard. I can't play on this controller.
Well, what I loved about it, because I didn't have a computer at the time that could handle that game as well as like do other stuff at the same time, you could put music on your Xbox and then have the game play the audio that you saved on your
Oh
Xbox while
yeah,
playing it.
yeah. I
There
had
was
a
a
couple
couple
games
games that
that
took advantage of that. I don't know all of them. I just know that at least Counter Strike let you do that.
the one that I will be talking about probably too extensively later is Phantom Dust that you could do that on. Three
Did you?
people are
Okay.
just like, oh yeah, Phantom Dust in the world.
I mean, I've heard of Phantom Dust. I've never played it though. It looked really cool. Wasn't it cell shaded too?
No.
Am I thinking of something else then? I must be thinking of something else. But anyway, so yeah, so the Xbox, it did really well in North America. That's a little bit of the background of it. It was, it was named after DirectX, because the program, Microsoft created to help game developers develop for PCs. Bill Gates did it out of just a blood feud between him and Sony. No,
Yeah, that's the
he
real reason why it didn't sell
yeah,
well
he
in
just
Japan.
hated. So no, yeah, I know, right? I did just see a sales breakdown. It sold 16 million in the U.S., 6 million in Europe, and only 2 million in all of Asia and the Pacific. Not just Japan,
Jeez,
all of Asia and the Pacific.
that's some
Know
serious
what's one
boycotting.
memory though, real quick before we continue on. One memory that will always stick out to me of it is like, and this is kind of a memory. Did you ever see the movie Grandma's Boy?
Yeah,
That, for those who haven't seen it, it's a Happy Madison production, so Adam Sandler's company. I don't even remember the actor's name. Alan Covert, something like that. He's the
I
main
don't know.
character in it.
I
Um,
just know all that cast is Adam Sandler's friends.
yes, and it's basically about these game testers who have to deal with this one asshole, and it's a comedy. It's raunchy. It's pretty funny though. But the one game tester who is just a stoner loser guy, the main character, you find out he's actually been secretly developing a game for years. And I remember he was developing it on the original Xbox. And I always remember seeing that. I was like, so in my mind, for some reason, I'm like, oh, it must be easy to develop for the original Xbox.
Yeah,
Which honestly might be true, because there was a lot of there's a really great video from this guy named Modern Vintage Gamer on YouTube, talking about why it was hard to develop for the PS2, which I won't go into because it's not relating to the Xbox necessarily. But it's really interesting to hear, because the PS2 sold so well, so you would assume that it was easy to develop for, but apparently that's not the case at all. So I wonder if it was much easier to develop for the Xbox.
probably because it was basically just a computer.
Yeah, just a dumbed down computer.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to just kind of some of our memories, as well as just talking about more free form conversation about the Xbox, a couple notes. One, the controllers. Everyone knows the original Xbox controller is the Duke.
Yes. Hang on. I have to do something for our video viewers, but
Okay.
you can talk about it for a second.
Okay. So the Duke was the Xbox original controller. It was fucking huge. It was gigantic, right? And when it was released in Japan, it was too big for for the consumers in Japan. So they had to develop a new controller for them. That controller, which is called the S model of it, actually it became the standard Xbox controller.
Yeah, I hang on. I'm going to turn this around. So I have Can you hear me at all? Is this
It's
picking it up?
I can hear you. You're in the background. I can hear you though.
Okay. So this is the Xbox One recreation of the Duke.
The
It's
thing's
like
fucking huge.
it's enormous, but like I have big hands. I'm 6'4", so like I never had a problem with it.
You're
The
six
cool,
four.
yeah, when I
God
don't slouch.
dang.
So the cool thing is, the part that sucks is that you have to have it plugged in because it doesn't have batteries. But that iconic startup when you would
Mm-hmm.
turn the Xbox on. Check this out. A little exclusive just for our video viewers.
Just this is just enticing everyone to go check out the experience point over on YouTube to see the video form of this
Yeah, watch this.
podcast. That's so cool. Yeah, so for the listeners, it actually has the Xbox startup screen in this little LCD monitor at the center of the controller. It's really cool.
Yeah, because like I remember getting that controller for the first time and being like, "What is this humongous?" Like it looked like a screen. Like on the inside, or not the inside, but like the center of the controller has this huge circular thing with a big Xbox logo that serves no purpose. It looked like it should have lit up or had a screen or something, because like you can tell by the design of it that it basically ripped off the Dreamcast controller. So I was like, is this going to be like a built-in like VMU like the Dreamcast had? But it just does nothing. It's just a big logo. So it's cool that they kind of retrofitted it and actually did something with it
Yeah, yeah.
eventually.
Um, some other notes though, about Xbox though. I always considered the Xbox, and this might be a good way to segue into the memories as well. I always kind of considered the Xbox one of the spiritual successors to Sega's consoles, because
Yeah.
a lot of Sega games ended up getting ported over to Xbox and also GameCube. Not as much on PS2, but like Xbox and GameCube were
Mhm.
almost like the spiritual successors to the Sega Dreamcast, which is weird because Nintendo, specifically for because some games ended up on Nintendo, because that was right after Nintendo and Sega entered their console wars, because Sega jumped out of the video game market, jumped out of the console business, I should say.
Sadly.
That's a there's I could do a whole episode about why, like what led up to that. Like
Yeah.
it's have you ever heard the stories of like of like Sega's woes leading up to like a lot of their business decisions?
No, no. A lot of the like that's why I haven't had much to say around this like the whole history of it, because like I know that's a lot more your wheelhouse and kind of like the left brain aspect of like the processes and like history and stuff behind it. So actually, I don't know the story.
Um it's long story short, because this is an Xbox episode, so I won't
Yeah.
dive into the history of Sega. I'll tell you off mic after we're done recording. But long story short for the listeners is that Sega released too many consoles and kind of diversified their market too much. So that way, there's not any one of their consoles could really succeed, because it was getting pulled six different ways. On top of the fact that then Sony had just entered the market
Mm.
and Nintendo was obviously still going. So there, that in a nutshell, that's why it pretty much like killed them. And I mean, and it makes sense too, because even if you look at the Dreamcast, what killed them ultimately was the PS2, because
PS2.
it was just a slightly more powerful console, even though they could do about the same. Like the Dreamcast was, it was just, it's such a bummer because it came out just at the worst possible time for
Yep.
it. It came out too late for the N64 and PS1 gen, um, and it came out too early for the PS2, Xbox, GameCube gen. So
Yeah.
like it just came out right in the middle of the two, and historically, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like the Wii U that flopped. It came out right
Yeah.
before, it was right at the tail end of the Wii, PS3, and 360, but it was still less powerful than the PS3 and 360. And
Yeah.
then a year later, it had to compete with PS4 and Xbox One.
It's weird because like I see the, at least to me anyway, I see the Sega Saturn as more of a failure, because I knew like one person that had a Sega Saturn. There were zero games on it that I was remotely interested in. And so you'd think that like they'd learn from releasing that one at a weird time that I think if they had just waited, and I think if like the consoles that were to come out at the same time was PS2, GameCube, Sega Saturn, and maybe even the Xbox, like we could have had like a
You mean Sega Dreamcast?
or yeah, what did I say?
You said Saturn again.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, but no, and they would have had to make the Dreamcast a little bit more powerful, I think, as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Well,
Dreamcast was
GameCube
super
was,
successful. The Dreamcast was initially super successful. It's just
yeah.
that it it came out at a bad time because it came out a year before all the more powerful consoles came up. So it was
Yeah.
like the Dreamcast was it was like a in between step between like the Saturn and what Sega's true like 64-bit, for lack of a better term, console is.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I consider the reason I can kind of consider the Xbox as like a Sega spiritual successor is because the Xbox ended up having games like we're going to talk about it later, Jet Set Radio Futures.
Mhm.
I know there's a bunch of others. Why am I not thinking of
Shenmue,
them?
they put the Shenmue 2 on there.
Mm-hmm.
Which it literally just feels like the sinking ship of the Dreamcast was just like going down, and they're just handing off all their IPs to Microsoft, who's got this bright and shiny new boat. Just like, please take Jet Set Radio, please take Shenmue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't let these die. And
Was Futures
it
a
worked.
sequel to the original?
So it's a
Enhanced port?
it's no, it's somewhere in between. It's almost like they made a second game, but they retold the story of the first one again. So like it's the
Interesting.
same story, but some of the characters are different. They changed some of the characters' names, which is bizarre. Like Mew became Rith, like the little the girl, the kind of Lolita looking
Mm.
blue dress girl, or Cube. I forget some of them, but there's a lot of like Tab in the first game became Corn in the second game. It's like, well, I don't understand. Well, I know it's like, why'd you have to? All those
Localization isn't
characters.
always some of the localization choices aren't always the greatest.
Yeah, yeah, but
Uh,
it's kind of just like make this same game again, but better and slightly different, like a 1.5. That's why it's
but
not Jet Set Radio 2. It's just Jet Set Radio Future.
I could see that. But I think this is a good time to dive into some of our personal memories of the console and some of the just some of the various aspects of it, because like uh one of the things that we always that I've mentioned before when talking about video game history is context. Like you can go back and look at like, oh, Microsoft only sold 24 million worldwide and 16 million of it was in the US, but like, or is it North America, excuse me. But like if you really think about it, like the original Xbox, while it didn't get anywhere near close to the competitors in terms of sales, it was pretty close to the GameCube. I think the
Mhm.
GameCube, how much did the GameCube sell? Actually, now I think about it. Let me look that up while I'm kind of talking. But so while it was actually, yeah, it sold less than the game. Or no, hold on. What am I doing now? It sold more than the GameCube. Believe it or
Over
not, the
here.
GameCube sold 21.75 mil worldwide, and the Xbox sold 24 million worldwide, so they're about neck and neck. The
Yeah.
PS2 just ran away with that generation,
Oh
like
yeah.
it wasn't even close. But considering that this console, and also I can't remember what exact date I'm releasing this episode, it's either before or after the GameCube retrospective episode.
Mm.
I think it's after.
Yeah,
uh
and for anyone watching, I did not break my hand again. This is we're recording this in like September, so
yes, we're recording this a couple months in advance.
there's probably going to be episodes released afterwards that like after I get this cast off, and then
That's
all
gonna
of a
be
sudden I'm
so
going to
weird.
have it again.
But yeah, so you know it- for a console that really did not sell anywhere near its lead competitor, like I said, approximately a sixth of what the PS2 sold, it really has a strong foothold in the mindset, in the zeitgeist of people's minds. Like I mean, obviously it launched Xbox to, or Microsoft, to be a serious competitor in the home console space, and it still
Mhm.
is. Even, I
Oh yeah.
mean, like I know the Xbox One didn't sell as well as the PS4 by a pretty significant margin from my understanding, but Microsoft's they're still going. They have the Series X, and the Series X, from what I understand, is doing pretty decent. um
Yeah.
I
It's
mean, if you can find one.
I know. I mean, it's the same with the PS5. I honestly think that like Microsoft, the only reason that like they're still going is the legacy of a couple of games. Like I think I I love the Xbox. The original Xbox was one of my favorite consoles of all time. But nowadays, like I have both. I have a PS4 and an Xbox One, and I literally bought the Xbox One only to play the newest Halo. And I think the library of like Xbox exclusive games is really just, maybe just to me personally, is really just is weaker than I think it's ever been.
Yes and no. I think they're starting to change that around. So what I think that so last gen, definitely 100%. They didn't like, they introduced Halo in the first one. They introduced Gears in the next gen 360,
Mm.
right? And those were their two franchises that really kind of propelled them through that generation, because Halo was still really good in the Xbox 360 gen.
Yeah.
I know not a lot of people like Halo 5 from my understanding, but I haven't
No.
played it yet. I own it, I think, somewhere.
It's
But
we'll get into that.
but with Xbox, really, they still innovated in the 360 gen, and I think the 360 gen, they ultimately won the popularity contest, at least in the US. I believe the PS3 ended up outselling them worldwide, but not till later in its into both of their lifespans.
Mhm.
But the reason the Xbox still holds that zeitgeisty, like that really firm presence, is because it revolutionized online gaming. Like Xbox Live
Yes.
started with the original Xbox. Halo 2 online multiplayer was huge. In fact, when do you remember the news stories of when Halo 2 was finally shutting down its servers in like 2014 or 15 or something like that?
Yep.
And as long as there was a game going, the servers would stay up. So there was one dude who kept in a game for a week or something like that. Like,
It was I think more. I think it ended up being like a month or something. Like I actually I have a story that pertains to that, but about the last days
well, no,
of
talk about it.
Xbox Live.
Talk
But
about it. Let's hear it
well,
right now.
so it's not related to Halo 2, but I'm just gonna keep teasing this game until I just talk about it. But Phantom Dust was the last game that I played on Xbox Live, because I had played Halo 2 to death. I know this is blasphemy, but Halo 2 is actually not one of my favorite Halos. Like 1 and 3 are like
That's
the,
interesting
the
because,
left-handed right hand of God for me.
see, like, I like Halo 1 for its single player. I like Halo 2 for its multiplayer. Halo 3 wore out its welcome for me.
Really? See, that's when I
Yeah,
was
I
like
think visually
too
Halo 3 is so much muddier than all the others, and it's hard. I remember when I
huh.
first played it, it was hard for me to see what was going on in that. Maybe it, and even I was replaying it like last year, and I still just can't seem to get into Halo 3. Just like the campaign is so boring. I don't like the
What?
additions to the multiplayer,
Huh.
but
Are
I
you sure
think
you're not
I'm
thinking
in.
of Reach? Reach was very muddy.
No, I'm not.
Huh. Because I go
I
back and I
think
look at 3 compared to like 4 and 5. Maybe it's just because it's compared to 4 and 5, and I'm like, this is so vibrant and colorful.
see, I like 4 more than 3. I
Wow, hot
loved
takes.
4.
Huh.
Um, I
That's
think
my
because
least
4 had a
favorite one.
better story than
Four,
3.
four did have a pretty good story. I did like that. I didn't like any of the like Promethean stuff and like
I didn't care about. I didn't. That didn't bother me. I do think I'm in the minority though with that opinion. Like, I
yeah.
do
I know you're
think.
not a huge fan of the franchise either.
Oh no, I'm a big fan, but I'm just not like
Oh,
a. I shouldn't say that. I like Halo. I've never had a bad time playing it. Like, even though I was ripping on 3 there, wasn't the worst thing. Um, it just didn't, like, I loved Halo 2 so much because I played
yeah.
so much multiplayer.
I
And I
Halo
think my
2
dislike of 3 is that I was so used to 2, and change is scary. And I think that's really where it comes from. I don't think I think a lot of my criticisms are not objective criticisms. It's all like, you know how sometimes I'll be like, well, I think like really this game is a worse off game or blah blah blah. I don't think Halo 3 is worse than 2. I just didn't like it as much as 2, if that makes
That's
sense.
totally fair because like that was my I played so much of Halo 1 like to death. So much that when you play a game for a long time and like you go to sleep and you dream about stuff about that game.
Yeah.
I would have those moments, except I played so much Halo 1 that I would just go to sleep and be dreaming Halo 1. Not like I'm not dreaming about Halo-y things. I'm just dreaming I'm playing the game. The heads up display was in my mind. I'm playing the levels exactly how they appear in the game. No creative license. I'm just playing more Halo.
That's really funny.
And I think I played that so much that when I got to 2 and it felt different, like you said, like 2 to 3 was different and it was like you didn't like it. I thought Halo 2 was kind of like stiff and like a little like clunkier, and it felt a little bit wrong to me. And so I think my take on Halo 2 is kind of like, to me it's kind of like the Beatles. I understand like it revolutionized gaming, especially with Xbox Live, and it blew up like nobody's business. The story is great, but it's just not for me. So that's why when Halo 3 came out, I was like, it was the adjustment from 2 to 3 that I was like, okay, I'm in it now. It feels a little bit better to me. And then I played Halo 3 so much that that became like the Halo experience.
The next Halo standard for you.
Yeah.
I cut you off though. You were talking about Phantom Dust with
Xbox
sorry. Live.
So the last day of Xbox Live, which to finish up the Halo thing, I remember hearing that the guys that were keeping the Halo servers alive had them up for so long that Microsoft was like, if you shut down and let us sleep, we will give you Halo 3 for free. And so I think like the last guys that were playing got free copies of Halo 3 when it finally came out. Or
Halo 5.
Halo, was it, or it might have been 4?
No. It was way after 4. I remember because Halo 4 came out while I was still working at GameStop, and I was not working. Like
maybe it was 5 then.
It had to have been 5.
Yeah. That's crazy that it was that long.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So they just kept going.
They were like, please just let it die.
That's commitment. Oh my god.
And they probably knew like, okay, we're gonna be doing the Master Chief collection, so like you're gonna be able to play this online again.
Yeah, but it's still when the Master Chief collection came out, remember there was a lot of issues with it. Like it was very buggy.
Master Chief collection is one of the best like rags to riches tales of like a total complete absolute failure cluster F. Completely, like now it's one of like the greatest. Like they've fixed so much stuff, they've added so much stuff for free, and it's just like, thank you.
It kind of bums me out to think about. You know what? That's a conversation for another day. I know I teased something. Now anyway. Phantom Dust.
yeah. So the last day of Xbox Live, when they were like, we're shutting down, some of the like old guys on Xbox Live that like I used to play Phantom Dust with back in the day, messaged me and was like, hey, we're gonna have like I think it was in like a Facebook group. They're like, we're gonna have one final send off of Phantom Dust. Everybody, get your decks together, hop back into a game. And we played what we thought was like the last game at like 11. Every time it would get closer to midnight, we were like, all right, it's gonna shut down. We were all sharing memories and stories and stuff, and it had been like what 10 years since like 2004 2005 when that came out. And everybody was getting kind of like emotional, like because this specific game in general like meant a lot to a lot of people because there's nothing like it before or since really. Mm-hmm. And we're all just like, oh man, okay, that was good, all right, good night everyone, like take care, we're gonna get kicked off at any moment. And then
it just never got kicked off.
And it never got kicked off, and we're like, all right, we'll do one more. And so we did another round, and we kept just being like, what is going on? Maybe it's on Pacific time. Okay. So maybe we have a couple more hours.
So and 3 a.m.
And it got to like, it literally got to like 3 a.m. And we're like, all right, everyone, goodbye. Like our last, for real this time, last final send off. And it went past again. And we're like, all right, what is going on? And we didn't realize that it was staying up because we were playing. So it was the same thing as the Halo 2. So people were probably like trying to pull the plug. I don't understand the methods behind why they couldn't just pull the plug and kick everyone out.
They totally could have. I don't know why they couldn't have.
Yeah. But so that was funny. And it was interesting to see, like I was playing with people on my friends list that I had and hadn't interacted with for 10 years. And people were like, yeah, I'm in college now. Like people who were like even older at the time were like, yeah, I have kids now. And it was wild. Like
that's so nuts.
Like Xbox Live like brought a whole generation of like people together. And like I still get kind of sad when I see people on my friends list and it's like someone I played Halo with back in the day or Phantom Dust, and it's like offline for 800 weeks or something, and
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
no.
I mean, I specifically remember with Xbox Live, because I hated that the fact that you had to pay for the online service. And I think the original, at least in the original one, I think not so much in the 360 gen, but I think in the original one it's kind of a bullshit thing, because a lot of times the games were hosted on other people's Xboxes. So like it's not like they were hosted on a server somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like I remember playing Halo 2, and there was a thing called host shoddy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So in multiplayer games on Halo 2, the whoever was the host for that match, they didn't have the input, they didn't have the internet lag that everyone else did. The what,
Yeah.
30 milliseconds, and that makes a big difference with a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Um that makes a big difference with the shotgun. So they there was a whole community revolving around this, where like whoever was the host, you would want to play with a shotgun because you would have a split second longer time before the other person would actually see you,
Yeah.
because you had that extra, you had that benefit of not having the input delay of the internet connection.
That's
And
funny.
a buddy of mine, his name's CJ, he I remember he let me, and I'll probably, when I inevitably do a Halo 2 episode, I'll probably repeat the story, but just because it's Xbox related, I have to tell it now. Um, he did this thing called bridging, and what bridging is where you connect your Xbox to your computer and then to online. So it's like you're
Mm.
running your internet connection through your computer, so that way you can fidget with it. And this is also how like hackers and cheaters did stuff too.
Yeah.
So what he would do, what bridging is that essentially it's like just rapidly turning the connection your Xbox has to the internet on and off over and over and over again. So since you have the weaker connection, the game is programmed to make you the host. So that way
Huh.
you could, because since you have the weaker connection, you're having a hard time connecting other people. They make everyone connect to you, so everyone's on an even playing field.
Oh, they pull you down. You're just dragging everyone down with you.
Pretty much. And then he would stop it, so he could fix it, so that way he would become host. And then what he would do, so that way he could it's so fucking shady now I think about it. He would literally bridge it, so that way like you turn off the internet connection on and off, and basically make it so other players would lag constantly, but you wouldn't.
Yeah.
So he would actually get hired by other players to help them move up the ranks using this bridging
Jeez.
thing, and they would pay him in 3-month Xbox Live subscription so he could keep playing. So he had I don't know how long it went, where he went for a long while
That's
of not
nuts.
having to pay for an Xbox subscription at all,
Yep.
because he would just bridge people. He would work out deals, or that they would send like those free 7-day codes. And this was back when like you could use more than one. So he would just like stack them. He would wait after the 7 days. He'd apply another 7-day code. After the 7 days, he'd apply another 7-day
Yep.
code. So this kid was a schemer, man. He was wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, I remember there were stories of, I forget what it was called, but there was something where like, I don't even know if this is true, but the rumor was like if you took a like butter knife and like wedged it into your Ethernet, like it would do essentially the same thing, and it would it would make everybody lag except for you. So you could just
What?
run around and kill everybody. Yeah, so like we'd be
I
playing
never
and
heard this.
you would just like die, and all of a sudden it would be like, wait, what? And then everything would be super laggy, and then like one guy would have like
60
30
kills.
kills and
Yeah.
you'd have like 2, and it's like, all right, what's going on here?
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. I might try that. I mean,
Yeah,
the servers are down, so it doesn't make much of a
yeah.
difference now. But yeah, and I also remember though, he actually gave me my first Xbox Live account, because I couldn't, like I said, I didn't have a job at the time. I was
Oh,
like, probably at the time I was 14 or 15. I still didn't have a job, And at least not one. I worked for my grandfather, which didn't really pay a lot. It was just something for on the side. Definitely not enough to warrant buying an Xbox Live subscription. Plus, at the time, um, our we had DSL, but it was still connected to our phone line. So if I wanted to play Xbox Live, it would stop everyone from using the phone because it was like broadband internet, but still in the era like pre where phone like your home landline and your internet line were separate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember I'd have to tell my mom like, can I play Xbox now online? And she'd be like, all right, only for like an hour, because otherwise the phone will be tied up for too
Yeah.
long. um
That
it
was
was
like the
just so
early,
funny.
very early days of just trying to figure out how online stuff was working. Like, do you know about the Advent Rising $1 million thing?
No, I don't know what
Okay.
you're talking about.
So this is like super important to, not important to me, but it left like a really strong memory for me. So this game came out on the original Xbox called Advent Rising. Probably no one has heard of it. It's kind of like, it plays a lot like Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. So it's a third person sci-fi action game. You do have psychic powers. You can like, pick enemies up, like the aliens attack and you can pick them up and throw them around. You're basically a Jedi, but you have like guns and rocket launchers and powers, and you can get vehicles and stuff. And it was incredibly ambitious, and it was pretty, like the cutscenes were gorgeous, even though there was very much inconsistencies. Like in some cutscenes, the main character had short, spiky hair, and then sometimes the cutscene would change and he has like long, like flowing hair, and it's like never addressed. And so it got rushed, and it was kind of unpolished by the time it was released because of crunch. And I really think it could have been something like really good. And and Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game, wrote the story for it. So I was
Oh,
like, okay,
wow.
you got like the guy who wrote my favorite book, even though he's like problematic and homophobic and racist. At the time, I didn't know because I was like, I don't know, 14. But he wrote my favorite book, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be so sick. I actually liked the game a lot. It got panned. It got like 5s and 6s from a lot of like review companies.
It
But
has a 7.9 out of 10 on IGN.
oh, okay, well, that's not too bad. Like, it's fun. It's a good game. I definitely recommend going back and play it. Like, there's a huge cliffhanger ending that sets up a trilogy that they never made, which is really sad.
I love stuff like that where they have this big grand design and
Yeah,
the first one bombs, so you're just like, well,
I know, and I'm so sad because like it actually feels a lot like Mass Effect. It got a lot into like, different alien species and councils and like intergalactic politics and stuff, which sounds boring, but like they make it interesting. So it's very Star Wars and Mass Effect and Halo, like kind of all together. Anyway, so the reason probably why a lot of people played this was because their marketing for it was you can win $1 million by playing this game. And how
oh,
they
okay.
did it was they released like blog posts that had these little clues of, you would download a patch like from the Xbox Live that would place this little icon somewhere in the game world, and they would put out a blog post that told you where it was or gave you a clue for it. And then you had to go find it in the game, and like the first person to find all the icons or whatever wins the $1 million, or it enters you to win $1 million. So I remember like every time it would go live on a computer, I'd be like, okay, and I'd have to unplug the Ethernet from my computer and plug it into my Xbox, download the update, and be like, all right, it's live, and I would go find it, and then you would upload it. And so basically, they did this for a couple of weeks, and it was a lot of fun. I had beaten the game by then, and it brought like life back into the game, and I was like, cool, let me go back into these levels and try to find stuff. Basically, people ended up data mining all the locations and were uploading them like seconds after it was supposed to go live, and they're like, okay, this is, people are cheating. So they had to cancel the whole giveaway. No one ever got the $1 million.
I don't
And what
blame them.
they, yeah,
I
you
wouldn't
can't.
either. Fuck them.
And so this game was published by Majesco. And so what Majesco did was they're like, all right, we have to cancel the giveaway, but everyone who participated in it gets 2 free Majesco games, like physical games.
Okay.
And I was like, that's cool. So I had already had Phantom Dust at the time, so that was one of them. So it was Phantom Dust, Raises Hell, which is this weird other 3D or third person shooter. Psychonauts.
Oh.
Guilty Gear, Double X Sharp Reload, Midnight Carnival, and something else that I didn't care about. So I had already had Phantom Dust, but that's how I got into Psychonauts and Guilty Gear, like as a franchise. Which, strangely enough, Psychonauts 2 and a new Guilty Gear have just come out this year, and they're excellent.
I've not played any of the Psychonauts games ever.
Oh, dude.
Do I have the original
It's
one?
a classic. I just got the limited run games, like collector's edition of the Psychonauts. Are you alive?
I'm looking to see if I have Psychonauts.
I couldn't tell if it froze or not.
No, I was looking. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, you got the limited run games collector's edition for Psychonauts.
Yeah, so on the PS4. I haven't played it yet, but I wanted to play it before the second one came out, but the second one just came out, and I'm not playing much of anything right now. But anyway, so you had to like. Luckily, I still had my receipt, and so you had to like mail a copy of your receipt to Majesco, and they would mail you back, whatever 2 games you wanted. So I got Psychonauts and a Guilty Gear out of this failed contest, which is pretty cool.
That's honestly kind of awesome because that means everyone got something versus like one person getting a million. So like,
right.
Honestly, that's because like you probably wouldn't have won the million.
Yeah, it was just something fun.
Just based on odds, but like but you got 2 great games. That's pretty awesome. I had no idea about that. I also am seeing. Sorry,
I hope anyone. No, I was just gonna say. I hope anyone who got that, got into either Psychonauts, Guilty Gear, or Phantom Dust from this, and I'm sure a lot of people did, which is cool.
I had no idea that this was a thing. That's really cool that this was for the original Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also seeing that one of the composers is Tommy Tallarico, who's also a problematic figure now.
Oh no!
In the gaming, he hasn't. It's not necessarily any social issues. It's more he is the CEO of Intellivision, and he's developing a new console called Intellivision Amico, and it's, to put it bluntly, but mildly at the same time, it's been a bit of a shit show. Like the just how it's being handled. That another thing I will have to tell you off mic because that's not related to Xbox, but I do think it's interesting that 2 problematic people for different reasons. Orson Scott Card for what did you say? Racism, sexism, all of the above.
Yeah, he's a very, very heavy Mormon, so everything that usually comes with that type of territory.
Okay.
Very sexist. There's a lot of misogyny in the books, and if you can get through that, they're great otherwise.
And then Tommy is just his is a whole thing. He wrote a lot of famous video game soundtracks, so that's his claim to fame. And he also organized the Video Games Live music concert series. He was the guy who pretty much did that. But he did wow, there's a lot of games I never heard of though. He did Cool Spot for the Sega Genesis.
Wow.
He did Cool Spot. He did Disney's Aladdin. I'm also assuming for the Sega Genesis. Same with he did Earthworm Jim.
Okay. That makes sense because the Advent Rising soundtrack is great.
It's very, I mean, Tommy Tallarico is known for being a pretty good composer. He also did a game called Jeep Jamboree Off-Road Adventure that I've never heard of before, but I just thought that
classic. Was funny. Don't you remember going to your buddies' houses and playing LAN parties of Jeep Jamboree?
I know, right? Yeah, Advent Rising was one of his in 2006, or sorry, 2005 was Advent Rising. In 2006, he did Jaws Unleashed. He was the orchestrations and arrangements.
That's funny. That game was actually a lot of fun. That's another one that I never played the real thing, but I played on the demo disc.
He got special thanks in an Oddworld game.
Oh, nice.
Sorry,
that's my franchise right there. Well, I was going to say, speaking of demo discs and Phantom Dust, because I would never shut up about this game because more people need to play it. Play it right now. It's on free. The remaster is free.
It's on free.
It's on free. It's on Xbox and PC, and you can play it for free, and it's amazing.
Wait, really?
Anyway.
Phantom Dust, the remaster is free on Xbox?
Yeah, Xbox and PC, and it's crossplay.
Oh, I have an Xbox One. and a 360, and I have a PC. I could get on all three.
Yeah, yeah. So this game, I guess, can I just talk about Phantom Dust for a second?
Yes. Go ahead.
So this game is a post-apocalyptic. It's a post-apocalyptic Japan where people have psychic powers, and there's like destructible environments, and it's an arena action fighting game, but it's a card game. Now it's not like Hearthstone where it's like the game is the card game. It's really just you get different skills ranging from like there's attack, there's defense, there's there's fireballs, there's like skills where you can pull up concrete from the ground and use it as a shield, there's like jumping and dashing, and there's like buffs and debuffs and stuff. But you collect all these skills and you put them in this what's called an arsenal. So it's like you're building a deck. So you can have decks that focus on high damage, you can have decks that erase the other player's skills, and so everybody has a spawn point on the map. There's like these orbs that show up, and that's your skills. And you have your four face buttons are where you assign the skills to. So if you have skills on the field that are like your fireball or your lightning or whatever, like there's poison moves, like all kinds of crazy stuff, you assign them to your hand, which is your face buttons, and then you're running around this map like jumping over like twisted like skyscrapers and stuff. And like there's one map that's like a highway where the road just kind of like comes up and is twisted around and like comes back down, and you can like pick up, like there's a mall level where you can like pick up like debris and tables and stuff with psychokinesis and just chuck them at your enemies, and it's nuts. Destructible environments and everything. It's super cool. And the campaign's great cutscenes, great music. It's very weird, very dark and lonely, and it's a trip. So how I found out about this game, or sorry, again.
I was just gonna say, like, it seems interesting because when I hear card based game, it's such a turn off for me. I hate card games and video games. Hearthstone sounds, I know it's popular. Hearthstone, excuse me, sounds popular. Fuck that. No, I don't like. I don't want it. I don't want it. And it's the same even with like if it's a mixture of the two, like for example with like a lot of the EA sports games. Now this is more of loot crate bullshit, so that's why I've spent more money on the EA stuff than I'm willing to admit. Less than 100 though, so that's still good. But still, you're paying for digital cards, which then are those players, and you can use those players in your team to craft your team, which is fine, but there's ways to get it without having to pay. But it's just so it's basically the freemium style that you see on like mobile phone games. And I mean that's essentially what it is. The ultimate teams in the EA games are freemium. That's all it is. It's like, but it's not at the same time because you're still spending $60 for a new title.
I know.
I hate it so much because it just. And the thing is, it's not even like, it'd be different if they gave you better odds when you buy the packs, but they don't. Which I understand from a fairness standpoint, the people that earn the packs versus the people who pay for it. But like, it just bothers me so much. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. But so when I hear card game stuff, it turns me off. So, but the way you describe this, it seems more interesting. It seems like the cards are just your abilities that you can choose from.
Yeah. So instead of just like running around, a world and just pressing a button to shoot fireballs, which is what you're doing, there's a strategy behind it. And it's like, do I take the fireball or do I take something more of a close range thing that will allow me to like get in and hope that, my enemy doesn't have close range skills? And it's really, you can play however you want. You can play like I have arsenals that are literally only hand to hand and have like speed boosts and stuff. So like at the very beginning of the match, you're like bumping up your speed and getting like dashes and stuff. And you just like zip, 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 like up to them as quickly as possible. And then just punching them like off of buildings and stuff. And it's just nuts. So yeah, it's like, there's still resource management of a card game. You have like your aura, which is like, you can't just like, once you get a skill, you can't just keep pressing the button, and it takes up a certain amount of aura, which recharges like a cooldown for like a universal cooldown for all your skills. But the way that I found this very obscure game was in a very obscure way. They on the original X or the it was OXM. It's not original Xbox magazine. It's official Xbox magazine. There's this thing that they did for like a couple of weeks, which is absurd to think about putting marketing for games behind such a weird wall like this. But there was secret demos on the discs where, do you remember that?
No,
Oh, you're
I'm
just
laughing at
shocked.
the I'm just shocked that you have secret demos. Like you said, like, isn't the whole purpose of a demo is to advertise the
Yes.
game? And so like we're gonna make this one harder to find.
Yeah, and that's how it was. But like there was this mystique behind it. So I remember reading about it in the magazine, and it was like, this month, um, hold hold L and push, a button or something. And I was like, what? And so it basically how they did it was you basically had to play Simon on your controller. So you'd hold L and you'd push like a face button like X or A or Y or B. And in case you didn't know what face buttons were. And so like you'd hold L and push like X, and if nothing happens, then you push a different button. If you push Y, then and the controller would like lightly start to rumble, then that's the correct button. And then you go to the next button, and if you push like X and the rumbling stops, then you've picked wrong. But if you push a different button and the rumble gets stronger, then you've picked the correct button. So you have to go through this trial and error and remember all these buttons. And so you'd be like holding L, and it would be like, like YXBBXBAY black white YX. And once you got through it and the rumbling, basically you're sitting there holding the controller like because it was rumbling at like max level once you get to the very end. And once you get through the whole sequence, it would boot up the secret demo. So the first time I did it, it booted up the demo for Phantom Dust. It was only in Japanese. All the menus and stuff were in Japanese. So you had to just figure it out by trial and error. And even that, all of these walls and all of these hurdles that you had to jump through to play this game, still, I was blown away by it. And I was like, I need this game. And it came out, probably a year later. And it was only $20 when it came out because like,
Huh.
I think they knew it was going to be like a very niche thing.
I miss when game devs did that, when they know it's going to be a niche title, so they make it a little bit cheaper to incentivize people to give it a shot. I
Yeah.
miss that. I miss that so much.
And it's still like it's not a low budget looking game anyway. I don't know about the actual budget of the game, but like the details in it were gorgeous. It has some of the best visuals, like the effects, the particle effects and stuff on the all the skills, and like just the aesthetic of it was like very well crafted. Like it's the voice acting's okay for a early 2000s
Yeah,
dub of a
yeah.
Japanese game. Like it's fine. The music's great, super weird, and it's a lot of fun. And like I said, it's free now, so please go play it. I act like I made the game or something, but I just want more people to experience it because I love it. But just jumping into like a match where you've like crafted a whole play style where you've put together these decks. It's like I never got into Magic the Gathering, but from what I hear of people that play Magic and Phantom Dust is that it's like almost like an action version of Magic where you put a deck together and you're like, all right, do I want to poison them to death? Do I want to erase their skills? Like, do I want to just overwhelm them with damage, or
That's
that's
a
however
lot
you
of
want to play.
damage.
Yeah, there was going to be a sequel, but I think it got canned, and I'm kind of okay with it because I saw early stuff of what it looked like and I was not really liking it. But
That's
yeah,
interesting. I mean, I'm gonna have to go check this game out now because I feel like the original Xbox, like for me in my mind, in my mind's eye, the way I kind of picture it is that there's just a lot of hidden gems on the console. Um, Kind of like how the GameCube is as well. Like there's a lot of
yeah,
games that there's the heavy hitters for each one. Um, Admittedly, GameCube had more heavy hitters than Xbox really did.
yeah,
Like what is it? And we've talked about Halo nebulously, but like really, like you cannot understate how important Halo was, not just for Microsoft and Xbox, but for the gaming sphere as a whole, but for game development as a whole, because the developer of Halo, Bungie, they were originally known for a series of games called Marathon for Macintosh. They were Mac exclusives, and Microsoft bought them out, and they came under the Microsoft umbrella, because Halo was like the first thing you saw of Halo was at an Apple press conference. Like Steve Jobs was showing off what Halo was going to become,
which
and
is
Microsoft's
crazy.
like, yoink, I'll take that. Thank you. But like that, once again, I don't want to go into too much, because Halo is a different, that's its own episode. Like Halo is so massive, it has to be its own episode.
I know, I could talk for 3 hours.
Oh,
about
you'll
this
be
game.
on the Halo episode. I also want to see if we can get some other friends on, because I feel like that's like, there are people who are passionate about the Xbox, but there's not as many people passionate about the Xbox as they are about Halo. Like there's so many people who are passionate about Halo. So that I know
it's the reason I got an Xbox. I didn't care about it until I saw literally a spread in the Game Informer or something, because I don't think I even had the magazine at this point, because it wasn't out yet. I opened it up, and it was just this full spread of like this night scene with Master Chief like coming up, and like all these aliens are shooting at him and stuff, and I forget what the caption was, but it was just so cool to me as like a 12-year-old kid. I was just like, what is this? And they had the little like Xbox logo, and I was like, what is this? And I read about it. They had an article about Halo and what it was going to be, and I was like, this sounds so cool, and it made me buy an Xbox.
I mean, I can't think of a game that is the definition of a system seller better than you know what? Sorry, one other game, Super Mario Bros. Super Mario Bros. For the NES, like, and then Halo for the Xbox. And don't get me wrong, Sony had their own system sellers, like maybe Metal Gear Solid, but that was also years and years into the PlayStation's life cycle at that point. So like there was other stuff like out way before then. That, I mean, Final Fantasy VII, same thing.
Like Crash and Spyro and the mascot
Crash would probably have been Sony's main system seller, like at launch ish type of time frame, or close enough to launch. But like, there's not, other than Mario with Nintendo, Halo is as synonymous with Microsoft as Mario is with Nintendo.
Oh, for sure.
Sony doesn't really have that, because all like there's now you could make the argument that like Crash Bandicoot and Naughty Dog in general is like synonymous with Sony. Well, they are, but it just,
it's like,
I don't know,
it Crash?
It feels
is it
different.
Drake? Is it Kratos?
There's
a bunch of heavy hitters that are kind of on the same level, but like Mario is obviously Nintendo. Like even like Link, Zelda is like massive, enormous. Pokemon, they're still not Nintendo's like big face character. Like it's always Mario
will always be Nintendo's face character.
Master Chief will always be Halo or
Microsoft's face character. But it's like, I can't think of a game other than Mario that really sold people on a console more than Halo did for the original Xbox.
I bought a copy of Halo before I even had an Xbox. Because I was
you just wanted to look at the cover art.
I just wanted to hold it. I wanted to smell it. So how I ended up getting the console was I was like 13, I think. So I was saving up money for it from birthdays and doing odd jobs and stuff, because like I didn't have an allowance or anything. So I had to, like, Sega N64 original Xbox, I had to save up my own money for it. So I had like a little bit of money saved up, and I had almost enough to get the console. And I was like, I really just want to buy Halo. And my parents were like, or my mom was like, why? You can't play it. And I was just like, I just really want it. And like, we were at the mall.
I need to look at the art.
And I was like, I just want it, because I know I'm going to be able to afford it soon, and I don't want them to be sold out of the most popular game of the time.
It's funny to think about that now, but honestly, as in little kid brain, like 13, 12-year-old, 14-year-old brain, that's valid logic.
Yeah, I was like, I have to have this right now. So I bought a copy of it. Couldn't play it, took it home, unwrapped it, read the manual back to front, because this was when manuals were a thing, and it was full color and had all this lore.
I brought the Halo 2 manual to church all the time.
I am reading the good word.
Yeah. I'm reading the good word of Master Chief.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So, but then that was actually what ended up triggering my dad to be like when he found out, because my parents were separated at the time, he came over to visit, and like I think I was like reading the manual or something, and he was like, oh, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's this new game, Halo, for the system when I can afford it. And he's like, why do you have the game but not the system? And I was like, well, I almost have enough saved up. And obviously I was short probably like $80 because I had just spent 60 or 50 on the game. And so he's like, well, how much more do you need? And I was like, oh, just another like 40 or $50. And he was like, well, let's go get it. And I was like, I was like, right now? Because at that time, it was like, you save up for stuff. Like, it takes years. And I don't know when I'm going to get $50. That was a lot of money back then. And he was like, oh, let's go get it. And I was like, so we drove to the mall and got it. And I went home and I've been playing it ever since.
So I actually just that sparked a memory for me of how I got my Xbox, my original
Really?
Xbox. So I remember back in high school. I got it late into its life cycle. I believe I would have gotten it in 2005, so it would have been out for 4 years already. And that's I think the 360 was already out, and I remember
Oh, wow.
um that the 360 was already out when I got my original Xbox, and they had dropped the price at that point, obviously because they were trying to sell the 360. Or it was either close to the 360's launch, or it was either right before or right after the 360's launch,
I
right?
didn't buy a PS2 until the PS3 came out because it was super cheap for the same exact thing.
That's nuts to think, especially considering we had literally 2-hour long conversations about Shadow of the Colossus and Eco, and you're
I
like, oh, I
know.
didn't get a PS2 till 2006.
Yeah.
um
I mean, Shadow Colossus came out in 2005, right? It was
I
one of
don't
the last
remember.
games on the system.
I don't remember. Well, I
We'll have to
mean,
go back and
technically no, because the PS2 didn't discontinue until 2012.
that's fair. Yeah.
And like the last games were coming out in 2012. Anyway, so I was celebrating my 16th birthday, and I remember I could either invite 10 friends to do midnight bowling, which was pretty expensive. That was like, because 16, sweet 16, my parents are willing to spend a little bit more on it. Or I could have a party at our house and they would buy me the Xbox for us to play Halo there.
Oh,
And I remember, like, in my head, in retrospect, like, why wouldn't I just do the Xbox, and I can invite more people than just 10 people to this midnight bowling? Because they would have spent like for everyone to go midnight bowling, it would have been like close like $150 to $200 because they were going to pay for all the kids, right?
yeah.
So they don't have to pay for that. They spend a little less money on the console itself because I think it was a price drop or something like that. So we bought the original Xbox there,
Because it was
and we had
expensive when it came out.
what
It was like, it wasn't it like $400 or $500 when it came out?
when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
Well, you know what? Actually, let's see what it says. Let's see how much it cost at launch.
probably
While I'm looking
499.
that up, I'll keep on talking. But yeah, it was just, I remember getting it, and it was just that was, we're sorry. I remember that's how I got it. I um wanted to. It was 300 at launch, by the way.
Really?
It was 300
Oh,
launch.
it was the PS3 that I was thinking. It was so expensive because it
Yeah, the
was the.
PS3 was like 600 at launch.
Was it?
Yeah, because it was
Jeez,
backwards.
because the. Oh,
It
that and
was.
it was the first like really accessible Blu-ray player.
Mm-hmm. Once Sony was banking on the success that helped them with the PS2, making it the first viable DVD player.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I remember having to
Microsoft,
buy the little like dongle to plug into the Xbox like
that that
controller
always
port to play
that always
DVDs.
bothered me, because the PS2 you could just do it like
I
from the
know.
controller, but with this they didn't have the. I guess it wasn't in the firmware to like, or in the software on the console to like make that work.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. But anyway, so yeah, I got the console, and I remember having people over for my 16th birthday, and we were playing Halo inside, and I was, there was that the core group of guys just hanging out inside playing video games, and I had to walk all over the place to make sure I was interacting and
Yeah.
socializing with all the different guests. So yeah, I just remember that. I remember being at the mall to pick it up,
Oh
and
man,
oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's a memory for me.
I
Um,
still remember the way that I know I joked about this earlier, but the the Xbox console has a specific scent to it that like I can still like go. This is so weird. I can go and pick up a Xbox controller that I've had for 20 years now, which is wild, and like smell the inside of the like memory card port, and it will take me back to being like 12 years old playing Halo at launch, like playing 16 player LAN parties, like everybody's tripping over wires and we're just all eating pizza and just killing each other on Blood Gulch for just until the sun comes up. Like those memories will like last forever. Like the nostalgia is
mhm.
just so strong for that game in particular.
I'm bummed that I didn't know you back then, because I used to have Halo parties all the
Yeah.
time at
Oh,
my parents' house. Um, and I'm gonna save a lot of those stories for when I do the Halo episode.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the Xbox, I guess one thing to kind of start closing this out, because we're going at almost an hour and a half now.
Yeah.
Um, the one thing that I think is important to note about the Xbox is that it really took its whole PC moniker really seriously, because one of the big things that was super popular on the PC was having LAN parties back in the day. Like
Yep.
people would have Doom LAN parties and Quake LAN parties
Oh yeah.
and stuff like that. And
Counter
so the
Strike.
Counter Strike, and so the Xbox allowed you to do that. I think it's really the first console that allowed that type of interactivity, that type of LAN
Yeah.
party, um, like social dynamic. And I would go over to friends' houses for Halo 2 LAN parties all the time.
Yep.
I remember it was a thing to bring, like kind of like what Smash players do, where you bring your own controller type of thing.
Yep. BYOC.
In fact, I was for people watching the video clip or the video feed or for people watching the video of this later on, you might notice a couple times I'll be looking back. One, I was looking for for Psychonauts. The
Yeah.
second time I was doing it though, I was trying to see how many copies of Halo I had, because I have 4 copies of the original Halo, because I would use them all for LAN parties. And those aren't ones
Oh.
that I paid for. People would bring them and then forget
And
about
leave them.
them and
Yeah.
then leave them and then never ask for them back. And
Wow.
I have like 2 or 3 copies of Halo 2, 4 copies of Halo 1, probably
Dang.
more than that in all honesty.
I would have had a withdrawal. They would have had to put me in rehab if I was ever without my copy of Halo 1 back in the day. Actually, for a while I was, because my sister, like, God bless her heart, but I still hate her with all my heart for this. She wanted to clean the disc for me, and so she put it in the dishwasher
Oh no.
because I guess I was complaining that I was probably playing it so
Oh
much.
no.
So she washed my copy of Halo, and I was like so mad
Did
because
it
like
still
I had to
work?
save up for it. No, no, it had all these like soap spots on it. So like there was nothing. I even bought like a disc doctor, the little crank
Oh
handheld things that
no.
was at like GameStop
No.
or EB Games back in the day, and I put the thing in. I was like, please work, and I'm cranking it, and it's literally just like destroying the bottom of the disc, and it was just
Oh my
like because
god.
after she washed it, when I put it in, it would just like stutter and stutter and stutter and not load, and like almost get there, and I could hear the music, like I'd hear like uh
Uh,
like it would be trying to do that, like the monk choir, and I'm like, come on, praying to every god that
you
exists,
can
like
sing.
yeah.
You can sing if you believe it, damn it.
And then I did the disc doctor and I put it in, and it just literally didn't do anything, and like the Xbox would just be like
It's so fucking disheartening.
but
Oh my
I
god.
think my mom probably just bought me another copy because I probably was incessantly complaining about it, and she didn't want my relationship with my only sibling to be ruined for the rest of our lives.
Over Halo. I mean,
Yeah.
I still give my brother grief because he brought over Pokemon cards to a friend's house and left a Zapdos over there, a holographic Zapdos, and then that family moved, and they like we still knew, like not out of the area. They went to our church. We saw them all the time, but that card was nowhere to be found.
Oh no.
I never forgave him for that.
I never forgive and I never forget.
Every now and then I'll bring it up and he's just like, "That's you still think about that?" I'm like, "It was a Zapdos."
Holographic.
Holographic Zapdos. Oh my god. All right. Is there any final thoughts though? Do you have anything left that you wanted to say about the original Xbox? I feel like we've covered like a lot with this. We covered a lot of our memories, a lot of kind of like the culture of gaming around the time that this came out. See, a lot of times when I do console retrospectives on other consoles older than this, it's hard for me to really go into it, like, because there's not a lot of personal experience with it.
Yeah,
The N64 I have personal experience with, but the N64, and like as with you with the Sega Genesis, like we were so little when that came out, so it's like you have the memories of the games but you don't have the memories of the community surrounding the gaming industry.
that's what I was gonna say.
PS2, Xbox, and then honestly, a 360 and PS3 is where it like most solidifies for me because that's when I was in high school and college. But like PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, that's where you start hearing about the whole console wars thing for the most part. Like
Yeah,
friends who had GameCubes over PS2s over Xboxes and stuff like that. The way that people remember the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis console wars is how I remember the N60, not the N60, sorry, the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox console wars. Admittedly, a lot less hostile than
I
the Super Nintendo Genesis one was.
I let the hype of like the console wars of that generation get to me so bad because like when I wanted an Xbox, like I didn't have a GameCube until later. I didn't have a PS2 until way later. So I was like, I'm gonna get an Xbox. I'm gonna be full Xbox. Like I'm getting the magazines and all this stuff. And I was like writing notes in the side of my like school like social studies like just like Xbox rules, like drawing the logo and be like Xbox is better than GameCube. Oh,
Xbox
PS2
rules,
sucks.
PS2 drools.
Yeah, it was literally like that. Just for no reason. I had this like heavy brand loyalty for no reason whatsoever. And eventually I was just like, all right, I really want to play Wind Waker. I really want to play Animal Crossing and Melee. And eventually it was like, I really want to play Sony games too. So I bought them
It's
all eventually, but
it's funny too, 'cause so my friend CJ that I was talking about before with his like Xbox Live scam that he had going, well, not really scam. He wasn't scamming people out of it, but he
he was
was
hustling.
scamming. He was that Xbox Live hustle he had going on. Um, he was a major PS2 gamer. Like he played a lot of PS2 games online. In fact, that's where he played Splinter Cell mainly, was online on
Oh wow.
PS2, which I always found was interesting. And then when I got him into Halo, then he became this hardcore Xbox guy. Like that's what he was into. And I
Yeah.
think it's so weird because it's weird that I'm the one that like converted him to Xbox, even though I'm a PS2 player more than I am an Xbox player. Like it's
That's
just
funny.
that our friendship happened to develop right at the time that I was getting into the heaviest part of my Halo obsession. And
Yeah.
so because that was right at the heaviest part of my Halo obsession, that just pushed him over into it too. If it had been any other time, I don't think I would have had that same level of like I don't think he would have converted over to that. I think he would have
Yeah.
stayed as a PS2 fan.
It's so funny. Like
Yeah.
it's console wars are such an absurd thing to think about because it's just like just play the games that you like. Like if you can, like I understand like there's a little bit of loyalty because of nostalgia and whatever, but like you know Dave.
Yeah.
So I went to, I don't want to say last names or anything on here, but
Yeah.
so his two brothers, like they had such brand loyalty but only because they didn't want the other ones to like encroach on their like space or whatever.
That's a
So like
very
the
brother
youngest
thing.
one was like he's only allowed to play Nintendo. Like Dave was like I only play Sony, and then John was like I only play Microsoft. And so like this was when I was in the Christian school. Like so we were in school together and we had to do these like assemblies. So we were basically like in church. It was like a church service in the school. And his Chris, the youngest brother, like he was sitting next to me and he was like he would try to get as much information he could about like consoles that he wasn't allowed to play and whatever, and he's like he would be like, oh, the Xbox looks so cool, like Halo is so cool. And I have this hilarious memory where I was so into Halo, like I was reading the books and the lore and I knew everything about it. And so he turned to me one day, sitting next to me, and he's like, "Hey, so like what's Halo?" And I was like, "Oh, it's this sci-fi shooter game that's on the Xbox that's really popular." And he's like, "No, but like what is it?" And I was like, "Oh, like the Halo. Oh, it's just like this ring world. Like it's where the game takes place." And he's like, "Oh, okay. So like no, like but like what is Halo?" And I'm like, "Well, it's like it's a super weapon that it destroys all sentient life in the galaxy because there's this parasitic thing called the Flood." And you're like, "Okay, yeah, but like what is?" And he kept going, and I kept drilling down and down further into the lore and like explaining what it was. And I was like, I don't know what you want me to tell you at this point. So,
Did you ever find out what he was looking for?
no, I was just like, I was literally like, I don't know what you're asking. Because I think he just wanted information more than anything, because we'd be talking about stuff and he'd come by and like try to insert his knowledge. And I forget if he actually said this or if we did this as a joke, but he referred to Cortana, or I think he thought like there was a gun called Cortana. And
Okay.
so he'd be like, "Oh yeah, like, oh, the Cortana gun." And we were like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, oh, Halo is such a cool character. Like, he's the best."
Halo is
he didn't actually say that, but it was that level.
It's still really funny.
But yeah, like it's like you said, the online, the Xbox Live, like that was really when for me video games became so much more of a social, not a social construct, but like a social experience. Because like, yeah, you'd go to your friends' houses and play like N64 together, and you play Mario Kart and Smash or whatever. But like playing like that many people, like you said, LAN parties, like all that many people together, all playing the same thing, and like because we're all into it, and playing online for the first time was wild. It's like I'm sitting next to somebody playing, but like I just killed somebody from you know freaking Norway or whatever. And I remember like I used to play a lot of Halo, and I used to play a lot of Dead or Alive because I didn't have a PS2, so like no Tekken for me.
That was another exclusive. Sorry,
Yeah,
the Dead
DOA
or
3.
Alive series.
Yep. And so I'd play that a ton. I'd play Halo 1 a ton. And then when Xbox Live came out and it was like, okay, you can play Halo 2 online, you can play the DOA Ultimate online. I thought I was like, I beat everybody at Halo locally. I beat everybody at DOA locally. And then as soon as I got online and got absolutely demolished, I was like, well, this put things into perspective. Like, you're not as good as you think you are until you start to play something online. Like, that was a wake up call for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, it brought people together. Like, some of my like fondest memories, video game memories, are like playing stuff online with people or playing huge LAN parties, and the Xbox was really what, for me anyway, like pioneered that.
To put in perspective for me, as kind of like my closing thoughts about about the Xbox in general, it, even though it didn't sell well, super important console for video game history, just because first console with an Ethernet port and a internal hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of just like the technical specs and that kind of stuff, Halo revolutionized first person shooters for the consoles the way GoldenEye did. GoldenEye made it like,
Yeah.
GoldenEye made developers realize, oh, you can have FPSs on your home consoles. Then Halo was like, well, here's how you make a control as close to a PC as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so much so that that's pretty much the standard controller format for not even FPSs anymore, just games. Like, so many games use the forward, backward, strafe left, strafe right, and then look around on the right joystick. And it's just so important for that specific reason. And
Yeah.
I still remember like playing tons of hours of Halo 2 and all that good stuff. And it just, so much so that my bachelor party, we had a Halo LAN party for it.
Oh, that's
We
sick.
went out to dinner, we went to a hockey game, and then we came back to my parents' house and we played a Halo 2 LAN party.
Oh,
It was fantastic.
perfect night. I'm only laughing when you're talking about the control scheme, because when I first got Xbox, that was the first FPS that I was playing on a twin stick controller. So somehow when I was messing with like the settings and sensitivity and stuff for the first time and seeing how the game controls, when I was going through the thumbstick settings, I guess I accidentally changed it to one called Legacy, which is left stick, forward and back is move, but left and right is turn.
Turn, yeah.
And the right stick up and down is look up and down, and left and right is strafe. And which I guess mimics more like GoldenEye, because you'd push C left and C right to strafe.
Yep.
And I think I did this accidentally. I can't imagine at 13 I wanted this conscious choice, but that's how I got used to it, because I didn't know any better. So I'm just like, yeah, the controls are kind of weird, but like I got used to it, and that's how I played Halo. So whenever I'd go to friends' houses and play, I'd be like, oh, my controls are all messed up, and I'd have to set it correctly. And they're like, why do you play like that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do. But I ended up getting really good at sniping in that game, and I think that control scheme helped, because like it's a little more precise, because you're using both sticks to kind of like fine tune.
Yeah, I could see that.
And people would get so mad because they'd be like, why are you so good with the sniper rifle? And I would just be like picking them off. And so everybody was like, don't get the sniper. Like they would never let me like use the sniper.
That's funny.
And like I was okay at the other weapons. But so from then on, like Halo 2, 3 continued up to today, I only play Halo on Legacy thumbsticks.
Wow.
I still do it. And it takes like maybe 30 seconds to get back into it. Like when I just booted up the Halo Infinite first flight that was just out to date this video back several months by the time you're all seeing this. And it was standard controls. I was just playing like, you know, regular first person shooter, and it felt wrong to me. And so I switched it to Legacy. I changed the now I have to change the buttons in Halo to Recon, because it's closer to
wild
Halo 1 controls, and I get back into it and I'm like, all right, I'm playing Halo again. It's wild. It's just something else to like kind of cement like that in my mind, as like Halo is so different to like all other games, like for me.
Yeah. I mean,
because of the Xbox.
Because of the well, yeah. I mean, I know, like I said, I didn't want to focus too much on Halo, and I don't think we did. Like, I mean, we did talk about it a lot, but like,
yeah,
you can't talk about the Xbox without talking about Halo.
Yeah.
So the console was bigger than its sales is the best way I can describe it. I think that's a good way to end it. The console was much bigger than its sales numbers showed.
And the Legacy.
Same with the GameCube as well.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, that should do it for this episode of the Still Loading podcast, as well as this video of the Experience Point.
Yeah,
shout out to the Experience Point. Go check them out on YouTube. Andrew, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me across all social medias at the Experience Point. It's just at THEEXP Point. If you want to follow my personal stuff, I'm all just Andrew the Kinsey. That's Kinsey. I try to keep them separate, because like I don't just post all my personal stuff on my like video game stuff. But yeah, we recently gotten into Twitch, so we're doing a lot of live content now. So well. Maybe by the time you see this, we're doing more live content, but I can't really play much right now. But yeah, so we're definitely
play one-handed.
Yeah, I've been trying to play. I was like, maybe I'll start Fire Emblem Three Houses soon, because I can play that with one hand or something turn-based.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to give us a follow on Twitch, I think would probably be the biggest push right now at the Experience Point. But we're on everything: Instagram, Twitter, all the things.
All right. And as usual for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do it in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use. That helps more people find the show. If you want to support the show monetarily, and at the time of recording, this isn't done, but I will have updated the Patreon, so there's actual rewards. So if you want to support financially, that's the best way you can go, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. The problem is with saying that now is that I haven't solidified what those rewards are yet, so I can't even say what those benefits would be. I can tell you what I'm thinking about in this exact moment. You'll see what it is. Go check out the Patreon to see what it actually is, because I'm giving myself a deadline of my 200th episode, which will have come out by this point, to get the Patreon stuff all situated. But I want to do maybe like a monthly like blog, just like a monthly blog, a monthly secret episode, like where I'll find some way to somehow send it to everyone who's a patron of like $5 or higher. The blog would be anyone who donates $1 a month or more. That's what's kind of going on in my head. We will see what the final iteration of that is. I can't do anything physical, like any physical rewards, because I don't have the means for that. So maybe if I start getting enough in total, I could start opening up some physical rewards, but then I'd have to figure out shipping and all that other stuff. Anyway, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. And the most important shout out, the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to go support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. Definitely check them out. I've been partnered with them for a long time. They're one of the co-founders is a friend of mine from one of my old jobs. They're doing a lot of great stuff. So please go consider donating to them. And that should do it. Andrew, seriously, thank you so much for joining me. I really feel like we covered the Xbox in earnest. I really feel like we did a good job on this episode. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, me too. I think we both cover a lot of, like, I think you and me are very like left brain versus right brain, where I'm just like, nostalgia. I did this crazy thing. It makes me feel. And you're just like, well, there's so much cool history behind it. So yeah, I love
like to combine it. I have the nostalgia, but like you are so much better at describing your emotions behind it. I'm like, it made me happy.
Yeah, I think that's just
like, I have no problem expressing those emotions. I just don't do it nearly as eloquently as you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that will do it for this episode of the Still Loading Podcast. Happy 20th birthday, Xbox. This will be coming out close to the Xbox's birthday. I believe it'll come out either a little bit before or a little bit after. I can't remember. So yeah, that'll do it. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.
Fly, like a butterfly. 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 Felt like a fly, like a butterfly.
Ready to flow.
I felt like a butterfly. 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 I felt like a butterfly.
Take it easy.
Trying to catch a butterfly.
Hey! Hey! Monster.
That's nice. Felt like a like a butterfly.
And you're ready to flow.
Felt like a butterfly.
It's so easy.
Felt like a butterfly. felt like a butterfly.